Welcome back to the Decidedly Local podcast. I am Jeremy Evans. Today I have a guest again. I'm joined by Julia Goren, who is the Executive Director of the Adirondack Rail Trail Association. Welcome and thank you, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I told you you would be peppered with questions. I want to get right into it. How long have you been in the role and how's it going?
So I've been in the role since May and it's now December. So 7 months and it's great. It's a lot of fun. The Adirondack Rail Trail is a place that people really love. And the Rail Trail Association is a great group of people. So it's really a pleasure.
Well, that's great to hear, but I know it's not all roses because one of your jobs is to bring all of the different stakeholders together.
Mm-hmm.
Who are all the let's make a list of all of the stakeholders that you're trying to work with to come together and work on collective action that makes the rail trail better.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that really gets at the heart of who ARTA is as an organization. So first of all, we are working with 7 different municipalities through whose boundaries the Adirondack Rail Trail crosses. So that's the town of North Elba, the village of Lake Placid, town of Harrietstown, the village of Saranac Lake, the town of Santa Clara, the town of Tupper Lake, and the village of Tupper Lake. So 7 different municipal bodies, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, who is, of course, the land manager for the Adirondack Rail Trail. And then you have the recreational stakeholders. So you have the municipal stakeholders whose land is adjacent. You have the state as the agency that has the care and custody of the trail itself. And then you have the recreational stakeholders. So those are the bicycle community, the walking, pedestrian community, the snowmobile community. Those are kind of the that's our big 3. Also recognizing that one of the things that makes the Adirondack Rail Trail special is that it is a 34-mile accessible trail. So when we're thinking about the Adirondack Rail Trail and thinking about routes on and off the rail trail, we also keep in mind that the goal is to have the entire trail ADA accessible. So it's another stakeholder group, a really important stakeholder group. And then you have the business communities because the rail trail is an amazing opportunity for economic development for these communities. We have the folks who are going to use the trail, the folks who are going to economically benefit from the trail, the folks who are going to benefit because they're using the trail. Those are all of the different stakeholders that come to the table. And the great thing about the rail trail is that we all are excited about it. And the great thing and sometimes challenging thing about working with all of these different stakeholders is everybody has their own slice of the pie or slice of the trail that is most important to them, where they really want the focus to be. And ARTA's job is just to kind of help work with everybody and make sure that we're hearing and trying to move forward with projects for everyone.
And I'm sure that's just going perfect, that everybody is happy to just wait their turn and that nobody actually has their own opinions. I mean, that's a group that doesn't sound like they have any opinions when you list that group of stakeholders. So sometimes you probably just want to just say, somebody say something. Don't be afraid.
So no, obviously it's a highly opinionated group. Again, I mean, I come from a background of working with a variety of different stakeholder groups, and I will say that things are much at this point, and I know that that wasn't true 10 years ago when there was the fight about whether or not the trail was going to be created. But at this point, it's a pretty collegial group. It's pretty good in that we have, again, pretty similar goals, not always perfectly in alignment. And there are some examples where goals are not exactly in alignment, but closely in alignment, but also the ability of different entities, the desires of different entities, and the mission of different entities. That's where you get the opportunity to try and think creatively about how we come up with solutions that work. So to give an example, and the one that comes immediately to mind is the idea of signs for visitors on the rail trail. And you have a stakeholder group, the visitors on the rail trail, who want signs because they want to know, for example, how do I find a restroom, or where do I go to get something to eat, or, things like that. You have another stakeholder group. Those are the business owners who would very much like to have people come to their businesses. So that's good because we're in alignment there, right? We have
Yep.
visitors who want to spend
Yeah, that's a
money, and
great
we
way
have,
to look at it.
yeah. Um, and then you have the municipality, which would also like to get people off of the trail into their businesses, but doing so in a way that is safe, and making sure that however people are doing so, it's not creating additional traffic hazards or things like that. So they want to identify a route to get people on and off the trail. And then you have the state. And the thing that's really cool about the Adirondack Rail Trail, is that it's forest preserve. So what I try to remember myself and remind others as we're working on this is that functionally, although the experience of the user is very different, functionally from a management standpoint, this isn't different from the High Peaks Wilderness. This is so whatever is going on the rail trail in terms of amenity signage, it has to be appropriate for the forest preserve. So the forest preserve can't point a visitor to a particular restaurant, for example, because that's not appropriate. And the forest preserve, there's a reason that signs are pretty minimal on the forest preserve, and that's intentional to preserve the wild forest character. So that's where you have an opportunity where you might say, okay, well, let's just slap signs at every intersection where there's a business nearby, and we can get people off to the businesses and they'll have what they want, whether it's ice cream or gas or whatever, where you have to work within the character of the forest preserve. So again, that's where you get the interesting conversations about what what can we allow, like what is allowed within the corridor of the trail itself. Where can we use the corridor of the trail and a small amount of signage on the corridor of the trail, and then provide significantly more signage off of the corridor of the trail. So you might be able
Right.
to say, downtown, and then 50 feet off the trail, once you're out of the forest preserve, then you can provide a village map, for example, in Saranac Lake, that might provide where a person is and where everything is, so that then they can find what they're looking for. So that's
Right.
that's an
So
example.
can we talk about that more for a second? Because I think that, I mean, the signage it's understandable why there's a lot of attention on that, right? Because, like you said, I think you mentioned the connections to and from the rail trail. I hope we get into that more in a minute. But signage is a form of making those connections from the rail
Absolutely.
trail to something within a community. And I think you said it, and I haven't heard it. I mean, there was a village board meeting a couple of weeks where we were talking about rail trail signage, and I couldn't follow it. They were going around in so many circles. It was like that spirograph toy that you have. I don't know where they started or where they ended up, but in it, the corridor itself is generally 50 feet wide,
It's 100 feet wide. It's 50
100 feet
feet.
wide, so you have
Yep.
50 feet on either side of the center line.
Yep.
Once you get past that line, the municipality could do whatever it wants,
Yep.
theoretically, right? And I know that you have been pushing to have some coherence or continuity across the entire rail trail for how that's done off of the trail, while still balancing the unique character or branding of the community. And I can recognize why that would be, that's just going to take some time and a challenge. But you just said it, right? Like, it seems appropriate the DEC would be able to say, we can have a sign here that says Arrow downtown Saranac Lake. That seems like a junction sign. Like, you would have a junction on the trail in the High Peaks that says 0.2 miles to Marcy Dam. It seems like you could have a sign that says 0.2 miles downtown.
Yeah.
Is that right? Like, is that kind of what you
Yeah.
expect them to do?
Yeah. And I think part of the village board meeting that you and I were both at, that was really confusing, that was a great example of like you have I just told you about the like, okay, you have different goals, and so that's slightly different. You also have you also have like a process difference. So the DEC has said from the very beginning, we're not going to put signs up until the trail is built. So that means the 3 years of construction of the trail, like there's not going to be signs on the trail until the trail's done to Tupper. Well, now the trail is done to Tupper, but meanwhile, people have been using the trail and being
Right.
confused for several years in Lake Placid and Saranac Lake. So the municipalities there very understandably are saying, hey, we want signage. We want to fix this problem. We have visitors who are coming in, especially now as the trail is getting more popular. We have people coming in from all over the world to explore this trail. And there's really basic stuff that's missing here.
Right.
So again, this is a process thing where the department said from the very beginning, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do any signs until we finish the entire trail, and then we're going to do signs as part of one large package. And that package is going to include the wayfinding that we're talking about, which is, basic navigation stuff, but it's also going to include interpretation. It's going to include, the historical piece, like things that are also really important and unique to the rail trail. So
finish
yeah,
your thought. I got another question.
again, yeah. So process-wise, you have the department with one plan, and you have these other entities with sooner needs and sooner desires.
Right.
And where
So
we, yeah,
with that, so okay, fine. Whether or not that's a good idea or not, as far as like step-by-step approach, whatever, DEC is doing their thing. When I would hope that they would be able to say to the town of Harrietstown, the village of Tupper Lake, the village of Saranac Lake, all right, we are working on our signage package. We're going to manufacture a sign in September of 2026 that's going to go up and say 0.2 miles that way for downtown Saranac Lake. That's consistent with how we do things, and we're just telling you that so you can plan ahead and work on your own signage, rather than a sign goes up in September of 2026 that says downtown 0.2 miles, and then and only then can the village of Saranac Lake react to it and start planning, okay, now that we're going to get that sign, what do we do with it? And like you said, it might be right off the corridor on a village street. The village could then decide to put up a sign that does say that does have more information than what the DEC would be. How do we make sure DEC is communicating kind of as we go with all the municipalities so that they can do their own concurrent planning rather than waiting until after?
and that's where ARTA comes in. So right after that village board meeting, we sat down between the village of Saranac Lake, the DEC, Roost, and ARTA, and have hashed out, okay, there's a lot of confusion as to what we can do, what we can't do, who's going to do what, and what the timeline is. And so what we were able to come to there was saying, okay, the DEC is going to approve a sign at intersections. The village has the ability to say, this is the intersection that we want signed. This is what we want to go on that sign. Roost will design that sign. And then the village will be responsible for signage immediately off of the trail. So if, for example, at the intersection of Pine Street and Main Street, or Pine Street and Dugway, depending on,
Who you
right,
ask?
who
Yep.
you ask, right? So you're at Triangle Park, you get off the rail trail. That's what the Parks and Trails Advisory Board has said. That's the safest way to get people off of the trail into downtown. So if that's the preferred route, the village is first of all going to have to approve that and say, yes, we want that as our route. So they have to go through a process so that so that we know that the municipality has said this is the way. But then the department will approve a sign that says, 0.2 to downtown. Then 50 feet off the trail, the village can put a map sign, and then they can put additional signage so that you don't have people getting off of the trail, wandering around, lost on Main Street because they don't know whether it's Main
Right.
Street or Dugway or how to get where they are. So,
Yeah. Yep.
so that's
And
the
hopefully,
process.
Okay, right. And it's all about process. We all hate process for how long it takes, but when it's good to, I mean, it's good to talk about these things, right? When you talk through things like this, it starts to make more sense as long as you can get to somewhere like you're suggesting. And so I'm glad that you were able to convene everybody. Why was there, why, it didn't occur to me until that, I don't know what you want to call it, merry-go-round meeting, that this idea that some in the village have been talking about doing temporary signage. And it was clear to me that what they were talking about was temporary signage off of the corridor.
Hmm.
I think everybody understood that you can't do, DEC is going to do what they do on the corridor. The temporary signage idea, which I
Hmm.
hadn't thought too much about, was supposed to be off the corridor. And as I was listening to the conversation, I finally realized I think that's a great idea, because if you put up a temporary sign and after a while you realize that you want to change something, it would be easy to change it for and make that change before you invest in permanent signage.
Yes.
So, and I don't want you to get into conjecturing, but why was there, I don't even know where that ended up, and why wasn't there consensus on doing some temporary signage?
There wasn't a consensus. My understanding is there wasn't a consensus because there was real confusion about where the DEC was in all of this. And that it was a very, like, I will tell you, Jeremy, I sat through several different meetings, and it wasn't until this last meeting where we all sat together, discussed, and said, this is what we mean, and repeated it back a couple of times, that it was really clear as to what everybody's understanding was. I
Good.
think it's number one, the rail trail is a unique project, right? So this is the first time anybody's ever dealing with anything quite like this. So
We are all learning as we go.
we're all learning as we go.
Yep.
Each municipality within the rail trail corridor is different. And I mean, that's an obvious
That's
thing
for
to
sure.
say, right? So in Lake Placid, the Lake Placid actually already had like they already were through a totally different comprehensive planning process. We're already doing a bikeable communities committee that had already identified routes. So that just, they're I don't want to say they're like several steps ahead, but they're in a totally different place. In Tupper Lake,
Right.
on the other end of things, before the trail was finished to Tupper Lake, they already had a trail built to take people from the depot area to not quite to
Right.
uptown yet, but like partway there. So each
Yeah.
municipality has its own kind of opportunities and challenges, and Saranac Lake has more intersections than any other municipality, and it has more intersections where there's a greater porosity between the trail and downtown. So it's much easier for people to get from the trail to downtown areas and vice versa. It's also potentially more dangerous because of the various different intersections. And you also have, I think, in Saranac Lake, a very high degree of commuters who are using the trail as well. So you have that whole different use. So, like, we've been talking about this like visitor use, right?
Right.
And you also have to think about what are the local uses, because we hypothesize that more than 50% of the use, probably more like 60% of the use, is probably local use, which is great, right? And like anecdotally, doctors are saying, hey, we're seeing increased activity in our patients, like there's community health benefits, there's all this great stuff. There's also places that people want to go as locals that the DEC is not going to think about because it's not the forest preserve, right? And that is where, again, ARTA, we're really excited to like pull together a planning process where we can say, hey, the data tells us that after school lets out, there's a spike in use on the rail trail. So we think that means that the kids are coming out of school, they're using the rail trail as a way to get around town. We can do some research to like back that up and make sure that's correct. But like anecdotally, that's what people are telling me. Hey, my kids use the rail trail to get to their friend's house. If that's the case, let's make sure that there's a really clearly identified safe route between the schools and the rail trail. That's the kind of thing that a community is going to really want to prioritize, I would think. DEC doesn't have anything to do with it because
Right.
it doesn't exist outside of the 100-foot corridor. It's like
They
nothing
built
else exists.
built and maintaining the corridor.
That's what they
Everything
do.
else is the municipality's responsibility to get with it and get at.
Right. And that's where, as a nonprofit, that's where ARTA comes in to say, hey, our job is to make sure that the rail trail lives up to its full potential for the communities, for the municipalities, for the businesses, and for the visitors. So for everybody. That's where I think, and it's not surprising to me, the municipalities have a full plate already. It's not surprising to me that they can't like prioritize thinking about this above everything else. That's why ARTA can, and then we can help just kind
Yeah.
of keep the process moving along.
Really, the fact that ARTA was formed and created long before the trail was actually finished, and with a pretty clear mission of what it's going to be able to work on was amazing. So we I have a lot more questions. I want to talk more about local and visitor use. I want to talk about physical connections within Harrietstown and the village of Saranac Lake in particular. I want to talk about the Union Depot, but we do not have any more time today. So I guess my question is, can you come back?
I would love to. Love to come back and chat about these things.
So my last question is, you talked about this last meeting where things really started to maybe come together in this discussion about signage. Can do you feel part of Arto's job, or whose job is it to then communicate the results of that back to the stakeholders? I guess I'm not trying to blame anybody. Like that, the communication, everyone has different goals and missions and responsibilities. And how do you take the good information that came out of that meeting and get it back out to the wider community? In
Yeah.
particular, direct stakeholders, business owners who may be really just like hounding the village. I want a sign on the rail trail, and they don't understand. And the rest of the village board, because we know that the most of the village board does not get communicated with. Is there a role for ARTA in that regard?
I think there definitely is, because there was a punch list of things that need to be done, a to-do list. You know, ARTA has part of that, and part of that was communicating with businesses, communicating with the board, the village board, that is, and setting kind of next steps. Part of it, though, definitely is the purview of the municipality as well. And I will say, like, I expect that was clearly identified as well. Like, what are the next steps? What are the next process steps for the different advisory boards as well as the board itself? And so part of that has to be in the hands of the municipality because it's
Sure.
their
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, so thank you for committing to come back, because there's so much more I want to talk about. This is a great thing. And every single time we meet, we can talk about how great it is, but then we're going to drill down into specific topics, because that's what it's all about now. It's going like like we said, we're all learning as we go. We've got to learn and then take action collectively. So, well,
Yeah.
so
And
thanks for, oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, like, one last thing is that, we've, like, beyond the rail trail, there's a lot of talk about visitor use management, right? And visitor use management as an iterative process, as a process where you reflect, you learn, you adapt, you change, you see how things are going. And I want to say, like, the rail trail is a really great example of visitor use management because there's iterative management happening right now. It's adaptive management at its best. And I think, like, ARTA is a part of helping with that for sure. But it's it's an example of, like, we learn, we fix, we correct, we get better, and we're all learning.
Great. Good. Okay. Well, thanks again for joining. We'll have you back soon, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time.